grief and loss is very deep emotional feelings, very deep. And people respond to it in their way. I have a whole book here with 2 pages of how people respond to grief. And grief is so emotionally deep that it takes community as well as the Lord to help you through it. It can impact you in a way that you have never experienced in your life. You can't even begin to imagine what it's like until it happens. And then when it happens, the emotional response that you have in you is so many different ways: anxiety, depression, my faith failed, all kind of things. Now, my experience, and it's kind of hard for me to revisit that, because you get to the point where you have pushed it to one side and it's not as severe and as strong as it was in the beginning. But it is so strange. And for me, my grief started as a result of actually experiencing and being there when my daughter passed. And then as she had passed, the unbelievable thought that she was gone. You just can't get it in your head. The person is no longer here. But how it impacted me was that I was suspended. It was like I was lifted up off the ground, and I wasn't any longer kind of in this world. Everything was not real to me anymore. My environment wasn't real. The room wasn't real. As we drove home from the hospital, the trees, the cars, everything wasn't real. It was like I was in another world, almost having entered into another world with her. And it was not until the Lord told me, put your hand on that table and touch it. This is your reality. This is where you are. So I can see how some people have strokes. I can see how some people just give up altogether because it is such a deep emotional hurt that you just can't explain it to another person. When you're in grief share, you sit and you listen to other people around you. And as you do, you can identify with them, but you find that they all have something different to say, different response. What happened to them at that particular time? So grief is a very personal thing. And it will come on you in waves. You think you're okay, but the next minute, my God, it'll hit you. And how it does that is that your mind revisits and gives you the image again. And when the image comes, that's the wave. You can be in a place. I used to pass where I took my daughter to work. And before I would get there, I would start crying, just grieving, because it was a familiar place. And as I passed the place, my imagination would begin to come into play. When you picked her up, You can almost see the whole situation. And so that's why I said it is a very deep emotional hurt. Grief hurts. Mm-hmm. It hurts so bad that it takes time to overcome it. Now you say, well, what scriptures did you use? The scriptures that I used were the ones that we would say together, my daughter and I. I got to the point where I could not even look at those scriptures because I would start screaming every time I saw them. The only thing I had and that I depended on was the Holy Spirit. He's the comforter. And I would call on him every time and let him know that I needed help. And he was there to comfort me and help me. Now, the word was there. How many times had we all read the word together? I couldn't read it because we had all read it together. We all depended on it. We all had faith in it and believed the power of it. But I learned that when you're reading the word, what is God's will for you in that word? For you. It tells a story. It deals with what happened in the Bible. You have other people's stories. But what does it mean for you at the time and the situation that you're in? It doesn't always turn out to be what you want it to be. And as a result, it impacts your faith so hard. It's like, can I really believe? What's going on here? And that's why you need the Holy Spirit to comfort you and help you during that time. Now, how long does it take this pain to leave? It never leaves. It never leaves.
Yeah.
It will revisit you at a time and knock you off your feet. There was one time, and I was in the Word, and I was reading, and I flipped to some of the scriptures that my daughter and I would read together. I started screaming, and I got so hysterical, I was afraid for myself. It took time, and no one was here. Pam and Ryan probably would have took me to the hospital. I was screaming and crying so hard. Eventually, calling on the Holy Spirit, he was the one that calmed me down and that was able to help me. So I find that
for sharing that story, I think for a lot of people listening to this, that is going to be a really powerful testimony, because especially for someone dealing with their own grief and loss, to hear you talk about this is a very difficult thing, the different emotions that you experience, how long it takes, the things that can trigger you and come out of nowhere, and all of that. I think there's a lot of folks listening that could relate to that. Now, one question I have, because I kind of know a little bit about your story, is from what I understand, you did at some point make a decision to join a grief group. And
yes.
I'm wondering what, you were praying, you were relying on the Holy Spirit, and so it's not that there wasn't a reliance on faith, but you still made a decision to seek out this group support for help. What made you choose to do that?
Well, I was visiting a friend, and that friend's mother was actually doing a grief share group. And when I walked in the room, and of course she knew the family and knew us very well, and she saw grief all over me. She said, "Gloria, it's all over you." And so then she invited us to come. At first I thought, I don't know if I want to, rehearse this in a grief share group. But I decided, yes, I will come. best decision I ever made, because within that group, we not only had our books to share, we had video where people had loss and they talked about their feelings and just and how the Lord had brought them through. It was just really amazing. And because we were all in a group together, sharing, it was just magical in a sense, because it helped. It helped relieve, and we became very close as a result of our sharing with one another. Sometimes we would just sit there and say nothing because we didn't want to. Well, that was okay too. And so that's how I came to the group, is because that was the Holy Spirit directing this woman to make sure that we knew about the group, and we joined it. So I would recommend it for the church, for the video, for the book, for the group, for everything. And I sat in that group for 2 years.
Wow.
2 years. And that was not every day, that was just once a week. But I was faithful to get there and sit with that group. And how it was conducted was just perfect for me. And it really, really helped me in what he will give another person to be. And words are so powerful during that time. Very powerful. Because you're so open and so hurt and so emotionally drained that you really do need to hear from someone else. Because you can't feed yourself that, even if you're in the Word. So God feeds you and encourages you, and that's why it tells us not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together, even when you're in a situation like that. Because it's amazing how the other person can touch your heart and help you.
Mother, you have no idea.
Right. You are blessing.
Yeah.
And just freeing people. Thank you so much just for your transparency.